The island in Peak is home to many dangerous biomes, each of which are only survivable with the help of items recovered from lost luggage. Yet an ordinary person wouldn't have that support. So how could someone realistically survive each of these biomes? The shore is found on the outskirts of the island and mostly consists of a long sandy beach resting in front of a mountain cliff. This beach is known as the back shore, and aside from it being mostly flat, also contains large rock formations reaching out of the ground. At first glance, the many coconuts hanging from the beach's palm trees seem like the most reliable resource. They're plentiful, calorie-dense, and require very little effort to gather. However, they're also composed almost entirely of fat, and provide only little amounts of protein. As the average adult human needs about 60 grams of protein and between 2,000 to 2,500 calories per day, a diet composed of only coconuts wouldn't provide nearly enough protein. But even then, gathering those coconuts might not even be safe in the first place, as along the beach, toxic jellyfish also frequently wash up along the shore. And while some might consider taking advantage of them as another food source, as only a small number of the species are edible, without precise knowledge of which ones can be safely consumed, attempting to eat them would only put someone's life at risk. Further inland, the various berries as well as mushrooms which often sprout along the cliff sides could supplement these missing nutrients. However, distinguishing edible plants from poisonous ones would once again require prior knowledge. Then again, as this toxin is not as potent as the jellyfish from before, trial and error might be a solution. Yet, placing your life in the hands of luck might not be needed, as the cliffs actually also house giant sea urchins. While their spines are once again toxic, the roe inside them is highly nutritious. So by using something like a large rock to crack them open, it would be possible to harvest their roe without direct contact. But food is not the shore's only constraint, as securing a reliable source of water might prove even more difficult. While the coconuts from earlier sound like a good solution, their water actually acts as a diuretic, a substance that ultimately causes the body to lose more water than it gains. And as drinking high salt containing ocean water would only worsen that fluid loss, survival would likely have to depend almost entirely on collecting water from the environment's condensation. By using the inside of a coconut, seawater could be gathered within it and a palm leaf placed on top. The sun's heat will then eventually evaporate the water, allowing you to catch the now salt-free condensation. And while collecting drinkable water like this definitely takes some time, luckily in this next biome water won't be as much of an issue. The tropics are a dense jungle dominated by giant trees. Smaller willows cover much of the forest floor, while thick vines stretch throughout the jungle's undergrowth. As being caught in the tropics' frequent rainstorms could result in severe hypothermia, it's very important to first find dry shelter. Fortunately, throughout the jungle are natural archways that offer protection from the rain. And while the best course of action might be to find an archway near one of the waterfalls for an easy source of water, in reality that water might not actually be that safe to drink. That's because without a proper way of determining the state of upstream sources, there's no way of knowing whether the water is contaminated. This makes collecting rainwater and eventually boiling it a much more reliable way of collecting drinkable water. However, collecting that firewood to even boil the water in the first place might not even be that easy, as the forest floor is also home to plants hosting many disease-carrying ticks. Now, while the ticks themselves might even seem like a good food source, and even the game lets us eat them, in reality the diseases they carry would be far worse than the little amounts of nutrients they provide. Instead, a potential better alternative could be the honey found within the tropics' many beehives. But while methods such as smoking out the bees or attempting to knock down a hive from a distance might be possible, harvesting honey would still carry a significant risk of multiple stings that can potentially result in fatal death. For this reason, relying on the surrounding vegetation is going to be a much safer option, especially since the jungle contains fruit-bearing plants similar to those found along the shore. And although many remain toxic, the tropics' increased biodiversity allows for a much wider range of edible options. But that is soon to change, as long-term survival is going to be much more difficult in this next biome. The Alpine is a snow-covered landscape home to only little amounts of vegetation. Carved into the surrounding cliffsides are deep caverns made of frozen rock, and resting within them are geysers that erupt sporadically. As this biome's frequent blizzards would prove fatal to anyone without adequate shelter, reaching the Alpine's caves becomes the highest priority. Additionally, higher up on the cliffside also lies a small pool of steaming water known as the hot spring, which compared to anything else we'll find here, will likely be the best location for a permanent shelter. Of course, it's important to first try and locate the hot spring before even beginning the ascent. though this must be done quickly as the Alpine's blizzards also drastically reduce visibility across the landscape. And while the climb will definitely be difficult, taking refuge within the smaller caves of the cliffsides can at least help mitigate some of the effects of any active blizzards. If you somehow manage to reach the hot spring, you'll soon find capybaras. While they might make for a good companion, capybaras would provide a valuable source of food, and more importantly, their hide could even be used to craft warmer clothing. However, as harvesting them won't provide a permanent source of food, cultivating some of the Alpine's berries should soon be prioritized. While these berries are no longer poisonous, growing them is only possible after finding a reliable source of water. Fortunately, the surrounding cliffside caverns near the hot spring are likely to contain icicles, which may be the Alpine's only dependable source of water. And while this water could still contain contaminants, it would at least stop immediate dehydration and help with cultivating the berries. Since I'm genuinely quite curious though, be sure to share your list of biomes you think you could survive in the comments. If you'd also like to support my videos and help them reach more people, consider leaving a like and subscribing. It would really mean a lot. The roots are a dense redwood forest where large mushrooms grow naturally along the trees' bark. Thick vines twist throughout the landscape, and the lowest sections of the thicket are partially submerged in shallow water. As most water within the roots is stagnant and therefore heavily contaminated, we'll most likely have to rely on the waterfalls that can be found along the surrounding cliffsides. And while I did mention earlier that drinking this water isn't all that safe, in this scenario we don't really have any other choice. At least compared to the water below, this source of water is a running stream of oxygenated water that is already much less contaminated. Of course, this water will once again help in constructing a long-term food supply. However, as the most readily available food within the roots consists of various poisonous shroom berries, eating them won't be all that safe. Luckily, medicinal roots, which can help counteract some of their toxins, also grow much more frequently in this biome. However, collecting them might just prove to be dangerous, as nearly identical mandrakes can also be found instead. When plucked, their screams are sure to alert any nearby predators, the most frequent of which are the large spiders hanging from the many trees. Since a predator this size would definitely not see a human as a threat, it's important to at least carry a weapon while traversing the ground. And crafting a simple spear from nearby wood wouldn't even only be for defense, as killing the spiders themselves can provide a valuable source of protein. Of course, their venom still makes them dangerous to hunt down. However, as more passive beetles also roam the forest floor, that spear might still come in further use, because just like spiders, beetles are also rich in protein. Though you can eat them raw, in order to stay safe from any potential for poisoning, you'd preferably still want to cook both of these insects and remove any inedible and/or poisonous parts. And while poison does make surviving the roots quite difficult, this next biome will prove even more challenging. The Mesa is a dry, hot desert separated by a large canyon. Various rock formations reach out of the ground, while thorn-infested tumbleweeds frequently sweep the area. The sun is this biome's worst enemy, as it will make traversing the landscape inevitably result in dehydration. And while the Mesa's many cacti contain large amounts of water, most fluid found within cacti can actually cause vomiting and potentially even accelerate dehydration. However, the prickleberries which grow on top of them may help with at least any current hunger. As a result, the best source of water is likely to come from the Mesa's oasis. And while this oasis is not so difficult to find within the games, considering that in a real scenario this desert would span out to be much larger, finding it would prove to be a lot more difficult. Especially since the Mesa's rock formations will obscure your view. So unless you climb on top of them, spotting an oasis from afar will likely be very difficult. And even then, because of the many powerful tornadoes that sweep the landscape, climbing on top of them would risk being picked up and hurled away. So it's probably just better to look for the oasis in the shade below. However, the shade itself might not be that safe either, as it often houses venomous scorpions that are hiding here from the blazing sun. Now, assuming you do find and reach the oasis, this natural regenerating source of water will mostly be safe to drink. And I say mostly, as you should probably still find a way of filtering it. Furthermore, the capybaras that tend to live here will also provide a good source of meat. Now, while the Mesa's scorching heat might have been its biggest challenge, things are about to become much hotter. The Caldera is a large lake of rising lava, with various tall rock formations. At its center is a volcano that houses the kiln, an area made of even hotter rocks and spouting lava tubes. Look, I'll be completely honest, if you somehow end up stranded here, you're probably not going to make it. I mean, theoretically, you could climb the rock formations and rely on the eggs found in the nests as food, but where in the world are you even supposed to find water? If you have any ideas on how to survive here, then be sure to list them in the comments. Thanks for watching.